Okay, so in this video, I'm going to go over the mistakes, most common errors that I saw in the week 2 narrative essay pre-writing assignment. So the most common error was someone would write, "My working thesis. I love to teach. This is what my paper will be about." And so here, this thesis statement lacks 3 solid reasons. Then I wrote 3 subpoints. I wrote about, well, I love teaching because my first job was at Crossroads, my second job was at UCLA, and my third job was at AMU. Okay, this is all wrong because this is just telling a story. In other words, I'm just giving you a resume of my jobs, or I'm just giving you a resume of my events. And so I'm not actually telling you why I love teaching. And so when you write your thesis statement, you want to tell me why you love teaching, not just a resume of events. All right, so here's the correct way of doing this. So if I want to hear a thesis statement in which I would say, I want to be a teacher because reason 1, I love to interact with students, I love to teach writing, and I love to see my students succeed. And so when you write a thesis statement, you need a thesis with 3 solid reasons. And then these 3 solid reasons become your body paragraphs. And so I've written that feedback several times. And so most students, many students, made this kind of a mistake where they just said, I'm just going to write about this. And then they wrote a story of, oh yeah, this is my journey into teaching. These are my struggles of teaching, and so on and so forth. So that was also another mistake students made. And so some students would write in something like my struggles teaching, or the definition of teaching, what I am doing today. And once again, this is not a reason. This is a story. This is story structure. And I went over this, I think, in a previous lecture, that when you have a story structure, then it's very much chronological, and it's very much about event number 1, event number 2, event number 3. First you struggled, now you want to talk about what your teaching is all about. So that's not what I'm asking for in this assignment, which was a very common mistake in this assignment, was where people confused a narrative story with a narrative essay. So what you want to do is you want to write your 3 reasons, and then here you have your reason number 1, and then it becomes the first sentence of your second paragraph. And this first sentence is known as a topic sentence. And so here, because it's called a topic sentence, because the first sentence of every paragraph tells you what the topic is for that paragraph. And so if the first sentence, which matches your thesis, is I love to interact with students, then that means your entire paragraph is going to talk about why you love to interact with students. So you're going to write 5 sentences about I love to interact with students because at least when I was teaching face-to-face, I love to see the people's faces light up when they finally understood a concept. I loved to learn about their backgrounds. I loved to get to know different kinds of people, things like that. So you could tell a story, or you can just give examples of, so you write 5 sentences of why you love to interact with students. So for an online class, it would be in the forums. I love to interact in the forums with my students. And then here, and then in the third paragraph, which also matches, I love to teach writing. So I love to teach writing would be paragraph 3. You use that as your first sentence, and that becomes your topic sentence. And then I'm going to write 5 sentences about why I love teaching writing. And for me, I love teaching writing because I love to write, because I like to write in my journal. I like to write to reduce stress. And I love to teach my love of writing to my students so they too can be lifelong learners of writing. and I love to see my students succeed. Here, that's the third one. In other words, the first time I grade a paper, people like this one, so many mistakes. People have no clue what the essay structure is. But by the time I grade the last paper at the end of the class, I love seeing the progress my students have made, and they get and I get to make fewer and fewer and fewer error corrections because my students have mastered the 5-paragraph essay structure, and by the end of the class, I get to be proud of my students for their progress. For instance, so here I give 5 sentences of why I love to see my students succeed. And then in your conclusion, you just repeat the thesis, you restate it. So the very first sentence is, I want to be a teacher because I love to interact with students, love to write, I love to teach writing, and I love to see my students succeed. Now, when you have your introduction, now remember I said that the thesis statement itself is the very last sentence of the introduction paragraph. So before you have a thesis statement, you need to have 5 sentences on top of this as to tell the reader why you became a teacher in the first place. So here you will write before the thesis, ever since I was young, I've always wanted to be a teacher. I used to play pretend, and all my friends would be my pretend students. They would raise their hands, and I loved being in the spotlight. And then later, when I was in college, I helped my college roommates with their essays, and I realized I was pretty good at correcting essays. I was pretty good at the grammar, and I thought, well, maybe I should major in English, and maybe I should help, for a living, and help people improve writing. Anyway, so your origin story of why you became a teacher in 5 sentences goes before the thesis statement. So this will become all of these corrections I will want you to write for your week 4 rough draft. And so you don't need to submit anything more for this week 2 assignment. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.